And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the first official episode, I should say, of a new show, the Zero Gravity Media Network, of Life and Liberty with Luke and Ross. I'm joined here with Ross, a good friend of mine. Super stoked to be doing this. Ross is the co-host of Shoe Bros Unfiltered with Kyle. We also host their show here on the Zero Gravity Media Network, so we're super stoked to be bringing out a new show and have Ross and Kyle on the network as well. And this is Ross and I kind of did a sort of a little trial episode, I think 2 weeks ago, but I think this is the first official episode, which we can say that to be the case. Is that correct, Ross?
Yeah, this is the first. I think this is the first time that we're like committed to making this a show, right? Like last time it was like, hey, you want to do something? Yeah, I'm not busy. Let's do something. This time it's like, okay, you know what? We're actually going to put forth, an actual show, and we're actually gonna, do this regularly. So I think, moving forward, I think Luke and I are in agreement that this will be every other Sunday.
Yeah.
Which will give, of course, us plenty of time for our other commitments. I know Luke has HSP. I know you got some other things, that you got going on, and I as well. So this will give us an outlet. This is, for you and me, we were talking about it. This is an outlet for us to talk of things that we find a little more intriguing than what we talk about on our other shows, because there's sometimes, where you stay on brand with that show, but then sometimes you don't get to talk about topics that sometimes are important to you or you want to talk about because you're staying on brand with that show. So Sure. This is an opportunity for Luke and I to talk about things that are, Luke's very philosophical. So, I like getting into his philosophical weeds and trying to think through his mind puzzles. And, I come at things from a analytical side, and of course have, a lot of experience in finance and business. So, I try to be objective in my critiques on that side. So I'm looking forward to this. It's something that, I was telling you, hey, look, I was kind of looking for more of an outlet to that side of things. So it definitely is something I'm interested in. It's something I'm excited for. And, of course, Luke, we've had many spirited discussions in the past. So I appreciate that. That'll probably continue here.
Oh gosh! If only listener, if only you saw the chat in the Discord channel between me and Ross. Kyle messaged us one day and was just like, "Guys, like, please, can you take this offline? Like, my phone is just blowing up right now.
Just mute the just mute the notifications for 2 hours or something." Because I mean, yeah, we were blowing up over military industrial complex essentially.
Yeah. I want to. Okay. So I'm actually gonna totally derail our first episode because I posted something in the Discord channel, and I want your opinion on this. So
right, let me get my mouse. I broke it.
Yeah. I'll just say. So I posted something in the Discord channel. I'll read it to you.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm like, everybody should know, I am a total, like, if I'm a boomer, when it comes to sports, I'm like a turbo ultra boomer. Know anything about sports.
Okay.
I don't know my ass from my elbow. And so what I posted a couple days ago, and I'm curious to know your opinion on this, Ross. I said, is it just me, or is A&M's 8-1 that impressive, considering we only played 2 ranked teams, one of whom beat our asses and the other we barely squeaked by? It just seems like we had an easy season. What I just like, I like it just for my own interest. I follow A&M football like loosely, and it just seems like this season I never heard about any big games. I never heard about anything. And it was like at the end of the season, it's like, oh, hey, by the way, we're 8-1. And then I was like, well, who did we play? And I looked at it and I was like, shit, we played like 2 meaningful teams, and one of whom beat our asses and the other one we barely beat. So, I don't know. I like
that's meaningful teams is subjective, right? Because everybody's going to have their different criteria for what a meaningful team is. When I think about a meaningful team, like the top 25 rankings are important, but that's a lot of different people. And so they're going to give preference to record, right? So where you have Liberty, who is ranked in the top 25, do you think Liberty could beat an Auburn, or do you think Liberty could beat an LSU? No, I don't think they could, but they outrank those teams because they haven't lost as many games. So you have to start, and okay, you should get rewarded for winning the games, right? You should get rewarded for beating the teams that are in front of you. But you also then have to sit back and say, okay, is this team better than this other team, right? In my opinion. So if I were to look at, say, the Big Ten with Ohio State, and I were to look at their conference, like Ohio State beat 2 ranked teams, right? They beat Indiana and they beat Northwestern.
But didn't they also only play like 6 teams? Or
they only played games? 6 total games, right?
Yeah.
The 2 ranked teams they played against, they damn near lost to, which were teams that any other year that would have played a full schedule, those teams wouldn't have been ranked. The only reason those teams are ranked is because they played a limited schedule, right? Those teams didn't play 12 games. They played 5 before they played, so it's yes, they're ranked, and that's great. And I'm happy for the fans of Indiana because they're going to get to go to a good bowl, and that's not something Indiana gets to do a lot. So I'm sure for their fans, that's something really cool for them. But if I were to say, is Indiana the number 12th ranked team in the nation right now? Are they better than Auburn? Are they better than Florida, Georgia, LSU?
Yeah, no. But my question is specifically A&M. Specifically A&M.
But you're saying, okay, did they play a weak schedule? And you have to then criteria that against, well, how do we judge why that schedule is weak? One of the ways we judge whether the schedule is weak is how many ranked opponents did they play, right? The SEC played a almost full slate. They played 10 games each, other than some one-offs that played 9. So there were more opportunities for losses, right? When you play a larger schedule, your chances to lose a game are much higher because you have injuries. You have not even injuries where a guy can't play in a full game. He has an injury where, like, LSU beats Florida, right? That's an upset.
So what you're saying is that it wasn't necessarily a weak schedule.
No, A&M had the 4th hardest strength of schedule in the nation this year.
Okay, wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
So
I mean,
objectively,
as somebody who doesn't know shit about football, sports in general, let alone college football, like I don't know anything, right?
So they had the 7th
best. Looked at it, and I was like, okay, like we played Alabama, and I don't know who was the other team that we played that was ranked.
So we played Alabama at number 1 and I'll say this: the score looked worse than the game did. If you watched the game, you'd have said A&M was at least in the game. And looking at the stats, but then when you look at the score, it's one of those games where A&M had a late 4th down stop that they didn't convert, that they would have at least gotten 3 points that would have cut the spread. They had an interception in the red zone that would have, that's a 14-point flip. When we're going to score 7 and then the other team scores 7, that's a 14-point differential. So when you lose by 28, it looks bad, but it wasn't a game where A&M just came out and got trounced, right? It was a game where A&M, they got outgained in yardage by less than 100 yards.
Here I am playing the Aggie, devil's advocate, but I mean, isn't that like every year for A&M? It's like,
it's every year for every team, right?
Season, just wait till the new coach gets his, gets his people in. It's like every season. I don't know, man. Like you have to I am so used to this with A&M where it's like, oh, we didn't. We lost, but we didn't really lose. Oh, we underperformed. We didn't really underperform. It's like every game. I mean, not every game, but like that way. And then like halfway through the season, it's always, they just go south. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a skeptic. It's just like, that's the story of A&M.
Well, I mean, A&M has, long been a suffering fan base, right? They've always been good, not great. They've always had those one year, that year where they could make a run. And then, for a long time there, it was the Mississippi teams that would beat y'all. And then there for a while, y'all would have a really good year and for some reason lose to Baylor or lose to Kansas State or when y'all were in the Big 12. And, I'm saying this as a guy who did not go to A&M. I never took a class I took a class at Blinn on the A&M campus, but I was never registered as an Aggie student taking a class at A&M. So it's one of those things. It's one of those situations where you say, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at it objectively. I have a bias because I grew up an Aggie fan. So of course I'm going to hold A&M at a little higher light. But if I were looking at the season right now, and I put this out in Twitter at the end, what I would have said is that A&M was the third best team in the nation, looking at how they played, looking at how Ohio State played, looking at how Notre Dame played.
That's what you think about this year?
That's what I think about this year. If I was saying, if I was ranking the teams, Alabama's the clear number one, right? Like, let's put it this way. The point spread, the opening point spread of Alabama Notre Dame was 17.5 points for the semifinal game. And it's grown. It's already 20.5 points, which means at 17.5, everybody was putting their money on Alabama. So they had to raise the spread because all the money was going on Bama. So they raised the spread. It's already at 20. Yeah. I think it's probably even gone up. The line's probably moved since then. So that means that everybody expects Notre Dame is just going to get thwacked in that game, which I believe is going to happen as well. Like at 17.5, take all my money. I'm putting it on Bama if I could legally bet on sports here. So, Clemson, Ohio State is going to be a closer game, but even that, Clemson is expected to just throttle Ohio State. So, there's a definite separation in the top two from the next 6 or 7 this year. That doesn't mean that any given Saturday, right, that Ohio State could come out and beat Clemson. It could happen. Notre Dame beat Clemson earlier in the year. Now, Notre Dame beat Clemson without its quarterback and without several other players, but they still won the game. Clemson is still a very good team, regardless, and that's part of football, right? Part of football, part of any sport is you play the games with the guys that are available. Sometimes your best guys are not available. Like, we don't crown the Super Bowl champion at the beginning of the year based on who's got the best team on paper, because injuries occur, right? Tom Brady goes down this year with the Cowboys. Dak Prescott breaks his ankle. Hadn't missed a game in his entire career. Then misses, an entire season. And, of course, they're not a very good team without him. Those things matter, right? And upsets happen. Upsets happen every single year. An Appalachian State will beat a Michigan. A bad LSU team beats Florida. A&M back in the early 2000s, when UT was on that wild streak of just being 10-win seasons a year, A&M would sneak in every other year and still beat UT just because it was a rivalry game, just because that was the game that those players got up for and that they wanted to win. And so let
me try to make a little transition here. So I've seen on Twitter a lot of people talking about the college football playoff. I guess the team which is a quote unquote elected to do the playoffs. They're equating this to the 2020 presidential election. What are your thoughts? Rigged or no?
College
football playoffs. Because I've even seen people like saying like CCP equals CFP.
Let's put it this way: the director of that vote is the athletic director of Iowa, which is a Big Ten team. He has a vested interest in a Big Ten team being in the playoff, right? So he's going to make sure that even though Ohio State only played 6 games, that they're in the playoff. Like there was never a possibility. The greatest possibility was going to be that Notre Dame fell out. But if you were to look at money, if you were to look at fan bases, Notre Dame is a more storied program that has a more – A&M has a very ardent following amongst its fans. Like A&M fans are very ardent. They travel very well. They go to games. But it's not as big of a fan base as Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a more known brand. And I know there's going to be a lot of Aggie fans who are like, no. It's true. Get over it. It's true. That's a true statement. Notre Dame has been around longer. They've had movies made about them. It's just a program that people are going to want to watch play. Now, are they going to get their asses handed to them? Yes. Do I think A&M was a better team? Do I think A&M deserved to be in the playoffs more than Notre Dame? Yes. But the TV makers were looking at a year where they lost a ton of revenue by not having as many games to put on TV, and they're going to try to maximize the bang for their buck here. And I watched the guy from Iowa, the athletic director. He came on TV and they said, "Well, did y'all consider the fact that Ohio State only played 6 games versus A&M playing 9?" No, we never considered that. And it's like, okay, yeah, you just gave the answer, right? It was never a possibility in your mind that Ohio State was not going to be in. And I said this on Shoe Bros the other day, that even if Ohio State lost to Northwestern, I still thought they would get in, right? And we see that with Notre Dame. Notre Dame got shellacked. Notre Dame got just manhandled, looked like absolute crap versus Clemson. And you want to talk about schedules? They didn't play anybody, right? The ACC is as weak of a conference as they come this year, and yet they get shellacked by Clemson, the only real team they've played, and they only dropped to 4. So I can't say that. I can't say that it's horrible. I can't say it's the worst decision ever. It's not like leaving Boise State out or TCU out back in the 2000s when they were undefeated and they put a 2-loss team above them. But it definitely is a situation where you're saying, I think there was bias in play, and it would be pretty easy to say it. But, you get the picks you get.
So CFP, likely biased.
Yeah.
What about let's just get right down to it. Let's see. I'm curious to see if we can get this video banned off YouTube. So
yeah, let's see. Let's see if we can just get zero gravity just completely removed.
Yeah. So election 2020 thoughts.
Definite fraud. The question is there enough provable fraud? So there's not a question of was there fraud, right? Like that's an idiotic statement. If you're saying there's no fraud, you're a moron, right? It's like saying that, the coronavirus doesn't exist at this point. If you're saying that there's no fraud, there's always fraud. There's fraud in everything. So there's definitely fraud here. The question is how much fraud and can we prove it? That's the tougher question. That was always where I was putting the odds really low, 95 to 5%, because to be able to prove it in the time frame available, where basically what the left has done is they've said, no, there's no need to investigate. Now, that's where they lose me when they say there's no need to investigate. But that's the tactic because they know they just got to run the clock out. They don't actually have to prove that there was no fraud. They just have to get to January 6th without enough fraud being proven to get the Senate to overturn the election. That's what they've got to do. They've got to keep the courts out of it, and they've got to keep the Senate, willing to not object to the election. And for better or for worse, they've won that battle. And it was always a battle we were going to lose, right? And it was, and the scary part of that is that we're now at a situation where I think they realize that that's where they are and that it makes it more advantageous for them to try to commit more fraud. Because unless we actively catch them in the act, which there were some cases of in this election, they're just simply going to deny it at all and say that there's no need to look into it whatsoever. So, yes, there was fraud. Is there enough fraud to overturn the election? We don't know, right? And that's something where 5 years from now we might find out. But we're not going to find out in enough time to prevent the inevitable.
Yeah, unfortunately, I tend to agree with you. I think that, so as is the case in science and law as well, if you're making an assertion, the burden of proof lies upon you. So if you're the one saying that, no, the sky isn't blue, it's actually yellow.
Yeah.
You're the one who has to prove that the sky is yellow and not blue that's the case in science. So the burden of proof lies upon the person making an assertion.
Yeah. And case law definitely has the innocent until proven guilty, and we want to, for as much as the right wants to harp on that when it's somebody on our side being, accused, we have to then allow it when it's somebody on the other side.
Right. So, but my point in saying all of that is that, here in this case, which is law, the burden of proof lies upon us who are the ones making the assertion that there was fraud.
Exactly.
And the left is cunning and skilled and proving themselves to be seasoned at figuring out how to make sure it's as difficult to process to have anybody on the right actually beyond a reasonable doubt prove that to have been true, especially retroactively. What gives me what I find hopeful is that Trump was out in front of this months. He was tweeting about this back in 2012. He was tweeting about this in June. He was, he was way out in front of this. What are your thoughts on the executive order that he had passed in 2018? With
the problem with that executive order, which is what we're already seeing, is that it relies on, what people on the right call the deep state, to actually perform their jobs and be honest about it. And we've already seen the report get delayed, right? It was already, hey, we're not going to be able to get the report in time. And again, this is a ticking clock we're against, right? We have to beat a time frame here, right? We're not playing with infinite amount of time. And I think there's people that know that the executive order has no teeth unless they have this definitive proof. And although great to write the executive order, if nobody has to follow, I can write a law that says X, Y, and Z, but if nobody enforces that law, the law doesn't exist, right? The law doesn't matter. So
yeah, even Sidney Powell is like starting to talk about like, oh, after the election's over, we're gonna right the wrongs. Like even she is starting to, you know what I mean? Like she is even starting to. I don't know. That's the vibe I get. Is that even she's
listen, we've seen with the stuff that the tech companies did with the suppression of news that was negative to Joe Biden, that it now has been proven at least to be under investigation. So did Hunter Biden cheat on his taxes? Well, we don't have a conviction, so we can't say definitively he did, but it is under investigation. That is an active, ongoing investigation that if the media had been honest, instead of posting these little stub tickets, or not letting us retweet things, they would have said, hey, look, okay, we're going to go ask the FBI. And we're going to find out that he actually is under investigation. Again, being under investigation doesn't mean you're guilty. Being under investigation means you're under investigation. It means there's some thought that you've done something wrong, but it doesn't mean you're guilty.
I mean, if you're the sitting president and your last name is Trump, then
or if you're
being investigation means
retired 4-star general who. So it was the great one the other day. I'm not a General Flynn truther or anything like that, and I followed his story, and I don't believe he did anything that was worthy of the treatment he got, but I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh my God, about it. But, when people get on and say, oh, he's a convicted felon. No, he's not a convicted felon. He was never convicted of a crime. He pled guilty. That doesn't, a guilty plea is not a conviction. A guilty plea is then going. So convicted means you've been sentenced with a punishment. He was never sentenced to a punishment. He was never convicted. Secondly, is that he changed his plea, which is perfectly legal to change your plea. And so he claims, and I don't know whether it's true or not, he claims that he was under pressure, that they were threatening to go after his son if he didn't plead guilty, which is illegal if they were doing it. But it's a tactic often used. And so I was posting, this guy was saying, oh, you're an idiot. You're just a traitor to this country. You think he's an elected, that he's innocent and that he could change his plea. And so I went and found, an article from the Atlantic about this woman from New Orleans who was a black woman who was pressured to plead guilty to get a plea deal in a drug crime. And, because her boyfriend was selling drugs out of her apartment and she had kicked him out the day before. And she was pressured to plead guilty because they said, oh, if you don't plead guilty, we're going to charge your sons who also lived in the house. And so she didn't want her sons getting in trouble. So she pled guilty and they got a plea deal. Well, something ends up happening and she ends up violating the plea deal because of some, misdemeanor or whatever, and ends up getting thrown in jail. And they said, well, you pled guilty to this. And then she goes back and said, well, no, it wasn't actually me. And I want to change my plea now. And I said, oh, so you're fine with it then, right? Because if you're fine with it with Michael Flynn doing it.
There's an important conceptual, there's a conceptual understanding around this language, this verbiage, which needs to be understood. I was actually listening to a really good stream. Ron, in fact, next time you're talking, after I'm finished talking, I'll put the link in the chat so you have it. But there's a lawyer, Canadian lawyer named Viva Fry, who has a really good channel. He does a lot of stuff with Robert Barnes, who represented the Covington, a lot of live streams, and he actually just did a live stream with Alan Dershowitz, which was really good. I listened to it today, and Alan Dershowitz made the point that he was like, guilty and not guilty are very technical terms. Yeah. He's like, because you plead guilty doesn't mean that you actually did something or didn't do something. He's like, there's a reason that, like, in law, we bifurcate between the words innocent and not guilty. Not guilty and innocent are two very different things. And Alan Dershowitz, he was on the team, represented O.J. Simpson, and he was a very, very, very skillful in that whole live stream to not use the word innocent and always use the word not guilty. And he even said as much. So, you know, when you talk about Flynn, when you talk about Trump, when you talk about all these people, you have to remember that there's terminology here which is being used specifically, which is, you know, guilty, not guilty, innocent, not in, you know.
And the funny part here is that for the people who are calling Flynn a traitor, right? Okay, you want to call Flynn a traitor, fine, that's your prerogative, but you're calling him a traitor because look at what he did. What he did was he called the Russian ambassador and said, hey, don't fucking bomb us, right? Like we're going, you know, I understand that the old president is just pissed you off. Don't do anything to retaliate against us in another country. Don't, you know, attack us in Syria or some shit. You know, give us a month and we'll sort this out. That's all he did. That's literally what he did.
Yeah. So when you say guilty or not guilty, the point is that when you say he's guilty of having committed a crime or he agreed to a plea bargain of being guilty, that doesn't mean he actually committed the crime.
Exactly.
That just means that he's quote unquote guilty. That doesn't mean he actually committed the crime. There's an act, and then there's a word which we assign to some sort of some other act, which is in this case just merely an agreement.
So there's a term in, you know, Latin called nolo contendere, which is basically no contest, right? That you're just choosing not to contest the charges.
Yeah.
You're just choosing not to. You're not pleading guilty. You're not admitting guilt. You're not admitting you're wrong. You're just, you know that it's not worth your time or effort to plead not guilty and then try to fight it. So this is often used in speed tickets where, you know, people don't want to plead guilty, but they also don't want to spend the time or money trying to fight the ticket. So me, I'm a stubborn asshole. I'll fight the tickets, right? Like I drove 10 and a half hours, slept in my car at night to go fight a ticket in Plainview, Texas, because a cop tried to give me a ticket, said he was following me for 8 miles with his lights on. Yet when I asked for discovery, which you should always ask for discovery when you get a speeding ticket, when I asked for discovery, no video at all, none, no video of the incident whatsoever. So obviously, he deleted it because the cars automatically start recording if he turns his lights on. So he had to have deleted it as the only answer. And finally, after 3 tries, they dismissed the ticket. But, you know, it's a very important distinction. The other thing that matters here is that Flynn asked for evidence several times in that case. And the government stalled. The government, you know, refused to turn over the documents or the evidence that he had asked for. He has every right to see any amount of evidence that will be used against him in a court of law. That's basic discovery. He has every right to that. There's nothing the government can do to prevent him from having that, right? They don't have to release it to the general public, and they can release, you know, but he has to have it. You know, his legal team has to have it. And the fact that they were not getting it from the government speaks very poorly of what the, you know, prosecution was trying to do. The second thing is then that the prosecution, upon re-looking at the evidence, said, you know what? Okay, we're going to drop the charges. We're not going to pursue charges. The judge then attempts to play prosecutor himself, which fully removes his ability to be impartial in the case, and attempts to still have Flynn tried. And, you know, that's not the judge's decision.
Yeah, the judge won't drop the case. Like even the I think it was the DOJ. I'm not quite sure. This is what we need Russ here for, because Russ knows all about this stuff. But yeah, like the prosecution dropped the case, and then the judge was just like, "Oh no, I'm not dropping it." You know, it's like
I'll prosecute him myself. Yeah, it was a bunch of bullshit. And it's one of those situations where, you know, we're seeing this more and more. We're seeing more and more government officials that are becoming emboldened to exercise excess authority, right? That they think that they're allowed to do things that they're not allowed to do. And we see this with executive orders from the president. We see this from, you know, Congress passing a 24-hour government funding bill. Literally, they passed a 48-hour one and then passed a 24-hour one. That's literally what they did over the weekend. On Friday, they passed a 48-hour one. On Sunday night, they passed another 24-hour one. So they're literally, and the only reason for this is to get further negotiations, to negotiate more, and to push the can down the road. Congress is supposed to pass a budget every year. Not once under a Pelosi-led House has the Congress passed a fucking budget. They pass continuing resolutions. That's not a budget.
Yeah.
But this is them consolidating power into the hands of the few.
Yeah, and I've seen on, like, especially on Twitter, people are like, "Oh, cool! You passed $1 trillion bill. Thanks for the $600."
Yeah. So if you take $600 and you times it by 330 million, which is, so essentially every man, woman, and child in the United States is going to get $600, right? That's exactly how it is. So you can literally say 600 times 330 million is not 900 billion or $1 trillion. So then you start saying, okay, where's the rest of the money? Okay, somebody's going to distribute COVID vaccines. Fine. Seems like a really reasonable place to put it. But a lot of it's going to bail out, airline companies, which I'm sorry, I'm going to be a fiscal conservative here, and everybody, the Republicans, blah, 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 are all for these bailouts. A lot of Republicans are pushing back against this spending, right? We have Thomas Massey, we have Chip Roy, we have a lot of other Republicans who are saying, look, this spending we don't need to spend this money, right? You had Josh Hawley, who came out and said, look, we simply just need to put in a clean bill where we send money to our people. That's it. Now, the flip side of that is for everybody who's saying, these other countries, they're sending money to their people and, we could send one $600 payment. Well, we've had increased unemployment for 6 months. Those people have been getting money every month, right? We just did it based on need, not just a blanket check to everybody in the fucking society.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you a question. So Trump is on board with all this spending. What do you make of that?
I think Trump at this point, dude,
he's always no. It's not at this point. He's always been a big spender.
Yeah, he's been a big spender, right? And even in his personal life, he was a big spender. Again, this is what I said to a guy the other day. Trump is closer to a Democrat in a lot of ways than he is to a conservative, right? Like he's had some conservative things he's done, and he's accomplished some of the things we wanted done. But to say that he's the ultimate conservative or that, he was the conservative savior as a president is illogical. Because if you look at some of what he's done, right, like banning e-cigarettes, why? Like who asked for that, right? Like a bunch of Karens, moms that wanted that gone. Like there's just some things where it's like, okay, you're using the government, you're overstepping your bounds, and you're overstepping your bounds and getting something I want done. But I understand that power is going to flip hands, and that means that anything that you did via executive order, the left is going to take that and say, well, if he could do it, I can do this. Right? I can do X, Y, or Z. And while it's good that, we're getting some things done and, he's worked within what Congress has passed before, there's also the fact that, we did not drop the deficit in the last 4 years. The deficit did not get smaller, even before COVID. Even take COVID out of the situation, the deficit did not get smaller. Yeah. And listen, there's things that government officials will use to rile up emotions, right? And to get you to not think logically anymore. And, Republicans use the military. Like, if you are against this bill, you don't support the military. Well, I support the military. I served in the military for 10 years, right? But at the same time, I don't see why we need a $690 billion military budget, right? I'm looking at what China spends. I'm looking at what Russia spends. I'm looking at what all these other countries spend. I'm looking at the equipment we have. I'm looking at, where we are. And okay, we, 500 billion, we could definitely, say 500 billion, 450 billion. And they tied some of that spending increases to pay raises for soldiers, but that's where like 4% of that spending increase went. That wasn't where all that spending increase went. That went to Lockheed and Raytheon and Boeing and these other companies to make shit that we don't really need, right? Like we We already have more fighter jets than every other country, right? We don't need to add more. We have, at this time, I'm not sure if you're aware of this fact, we have more jets than we have fucking pilots to fly the jets. So maybe let's worry about the people who are serving and not worry about the equipment, because the equipment seems to be there. We seem to be able, we have 12 aircraft carriers currently sailing, super carriers, right? Capable of launching bombers. No other country has one, right? China has 2 entire carriers, neither of which can launch a bomber, right? And of the rest of the world, there's only 23 other carriers. We own 12, and we have 2 currently being built.
Yeah.
How much money are we spending for shit that sometimes it's just a flex that we don't even need to flex? And this is not saying I don't want soldiers and I don't want, military to get good benefits. I want the money to go to the soldiers, to the people, instead of going to Lockheed and to Northrop Grumman and to Raytheon and these other companies who are profiting off of it.
Or less money in general.
Less money. So look, I've preached incrementalism for a long time, right? And the left is never going to agree, which, first of all, let's just go ahead and admit they're never going to agree to decreases in entitlement spending, but they're definitely not going to agree to it if we're taking defense spending off the table. If we're taking defense spending off the table, they're going to take entitlement spending off the table. And again, we don't have the upper hand here. We don't have the power to just go and unilaterally get rid of things we don't like. So we're going to have to make deals. And if we want to get the deficit under control, which as of right now, every American citizen owes $82,000 to the U.S. government to pay off the deficit. So
I think I think it's a lot more than that.
That's the current number. Now with the new spending, it's going to go up. So we're looking at 90K here soon.
I think it's more like 5 generations of 5 generations is going to, like, if you stopped all government spending right now, it would be like 3, 4, 5 generations to pay it all off.
Yeah, because of course you're not just going to go to every American citizen and get $85,000 out of them, right? So, it's definitely something where we have to look at how we can start reducing this deficit. And the first place we have to look is reducing spending. It's simple. You cannot spend more money than you make, right? That's a recipe for disaster. We have not made a payment on the principal of our debt in over a decade. We're only paying the interest. We now pay 7% of our federal budget to just making an interest payment on the debt. That's, again, not paying in principal at all. And guess what's happening to the principal? It's just going up and going up and going up and going up. So that number is just going to increase exponentially as we go on how much money we're spending. We're spending almost as much on, we spent $400 billion on interest payments last year. We spent $690 on defense.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Russ and I talked about this yesterday on HSP. And by the way, I'm gonna give a shout out. We got somebody in the chat. He's a really good friend of mine. Flew all the way over to Germany to come to my wedding. So Dan, thank you. Daniel, thank you so much for dropping into the chat. Yeah, we partied at in Munich for my bachelor party. It was awesome. I make an annual pilgrimage to I love you too, Daniel. We make an annual pilgrimage to Hofbrauhaus. Do you know that place, Ross?
That's like isn't that like one of the main places where like Oktoberfest occurs?
Yeah, for sure. It's like a huge ass place. And I just I don't know. It was my bachelor party, and I found this Airbnb, which was a bar that was turned into an Airbnb. So it had it had the whip show. Yeah, it had a proper bar and then like a restaurant style bathroom. So like me and all my friends who flew to Germany for my wedding, we were able to stay there. And just party our asses off and not have it be we weren't trashing someone's apartment. It was it was a bar with a few bedrooms, and it was just, anyways. So we went to Hofbrauhaus, house, and it was just a good time. And I just remember the next morning I woke up, it's like, God damn, something I ate there the night before was amazing. And all I remembered was that it was like crunchy and it had this amazing brown gravy. My mouth is actually, I'm drooling it. So I like jumped on their menu and I figured out it was Schweinhaxe, which is pork knuckle.
Yeah.
And so I make an annual pilgrimage every September to Hofbrauhaus in Munich and eat pork knuckle. And Daniel here in the comments was there for that. So
that's I can tell you, and this is for a Texan to admit this is saying something. But the best steak I've ever had was in Pennsylvania. And, in Pittsburgh.
Do tell.
So I went to Pittsburgh for a job. We were literally right outside of Pittsburgh, working on an oil well, and we had a flight the next morning out, and we were in Pittsburgh. So we went to this random steakhouse that my Venezuelan coworker found, and it was supposed to be a nice steakhouse. And we get there, and it's really nice inside. And it's one of the places where, you need to dress nice. You can't wear sandals. You need to, you can't be in your Crocs. You actually need to wear shoes. So
Crocs, I wore, I showed up in the Netherlands back in 2010 wearing Crocs, and I was staying with this girl and her family, and she looks at my Crocs and she's like, "We have to buy you shoes." And I was like, "We have to buy you shoes." So we bought shoes, and then after, never wear those shoes in this country ever again.
So we go in, and it's, we sit down, and there's a company paid for dinner. So it's not one of those where you're not really worried about the prices or whatever. So I order, the 18-ounce sirloin, and Jesus. So I was asked the lady, I was like, okay, how do you make your sirloins? And she's like, oh, we 3-day, we dry rub them and age them for 3 days, and blah, 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 blah. And it just came out. It was one of those where you didn't need a knife. You could just take your fork and slice pieces off this thing. It was absolutely cooked to perfection, seasoned great. And so we went back, which was really, what's that?
What part of Pennsylvania?
Pittsburgh. Literally in Pittsburgh proper.
Okay. Pittsburgh proper. Okay.
So we were right next to the UPMC, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center.
It sounds like Dominion voting systems might have cooked that steak.
If they did a lot better job than they did in Georgia. So we go back about 3 months ago, and we're in Pittsburgh again, and we're doing another job, and we couldn't remember the name of this place, and we're looking for it. We're like, where the hell was this place? Because we wanted to go back. And it was, we had a couple different guys with us, and we're like bragging to them, like, no, this steak is amazing. And they're like, well, where is it? And we're like, shit, we don't know. And we luck out that one of the guys who had gone with us the first time remembered what it was and where it was. And we were able to go back, and it was just as good. But I've been to a steakhouse in Houston called Baxter's, which was very high end, top notch, very good. And that steakhouse in Pittsburgh, which I, at this moment, have to put that as the best steak I've ever eaten.
Damn. All right. Okay.
So, well, for a guy from Texas to admit that somebody else has better beef than we do, that's saying something.
Yeah. I mean, America has the best beef in the world. A lot of, like, the beef we get, like, dude, it's really sad and pathetic, but I have to, when I'm at the grocery store, I have to literally sift through the ribeyes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll find one that's worth paying for.
I can say that Argentina had fairly good beef. Chicken was okay. Pork was nothing. The pork there was very bad, but beef wise, Argentina does have fairly good beef. Peru as well. So, but they raise a lot of beef down there. They do raise a lot of cattle down there.
Yeah. But here's the thing: is that Europe doesn't have the space to raise. They import all their beef. They import all of it. Like the beef that they have, they're all dairy cattle. So, like all the beef in Europe comes from Uruguay and Australia primarily, and it's shit. It's terrible. It's absolutely awful. Like you have to, Like okay, so well, I'll put this into perspective. Like as a Texan, you can understand this. And I was like, dude, can you, for the love of God, get me American beef? Because American beef, a lot of people don't know this, but American beef is really hard to source. Like
outside the U.S., yeah.
Yeah. It's like trying to get cocaine or something, like to try and get, because American beef producers, they internally, you have to pay a shitload of money to get beef outside of the U.S. or American beef outside the U.S. So I went to my local butcher and I was like, dude, can you is it possible? Like, can I order like brisket? He's like, yeah, totally, dude. No problem. It's like, how much would it cost? He's like, well, for how big of a brisket? And I was like, oh, I don't know, 11 pounds, just typical size.
Yeah.
He's like, the lower end ones I could probably get for about 130 euros. He was like, the upper one, probably 200, 250 if you wanted this fed. And that's euros. So after we're talking like 150 American dollars for a damn brisket.
Yeah,
Just a very typical brisket you could get at Kroger's for like $35,
Yeah.
That's like how difficult it is to get like good beef here.
So, I can say that, having been a person, so I've spent a lot of time overseas, and then I have a lot of people from overseas that come here, and I get to chit chat with them and talk with them, and I know things like Levi jeans, right? Like Levi jeans here, we buy them $15 to $25 a pair, right? They come over here. I literally had a guy from France come over here, bring an entire damn duffel bag, and leave with an entire duffel bag of Levi jeans.
Obsessed with Levi's, yeah.
To take back to, and like I remember when he came here, Academy was having a sale. Like it was like $15 for a pair of Levi's. And it blew his freaking mind. Like he's like, I would pay $100. He's like, I would pay $100 a pair over in France for these. And I'm getting them for $15 a pair. And he was literally calling his buddies like, hey, let me know what you need, what size you need, because I'll bring them back to you.
Hustling them Levi's,
That's right. Like, literally Levi's overseas.
Yeah, like this, and so I'll make a transition here because I'm curious to know what you're studying currently in your PhD. But yeah, I mean, this is like why free trade, and because like imagine how many. Okay, for example, I had to buy a damn MacBook. I bought a MacBook Pro like 2 weeks ago, one of the brand new one. It was $1,000 cheaper in America. And so I bought it like through the Apple store in America, the apple.com, not apple.de. And then I'm having to have my parents like unbox it and, unravel the power cord and then stuff it all back in and then rebox it and then send it to me. So I don't get, hit with like a fucking 20% VAT charge, VAT tax at the border and all this bullshit, and
we're kind of redundant to say VAT tax.
Yeah, value added tax. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get you. But yeah. But people, if you don't say VAT tax, people don't get it.
I get you. Yeah, you have to if you don't know what it is, then yeah, you're definitely gonna be sitting there like, okay, but yeah, value added tax is a tax. So if you say value added tax, it's value added tax.
Yeah.
It's just me being a jerk. So yeah, I mean, actually,
let me ask you this. What are you studying right now? Like, what you're doing? So, for anybody who doesn't know, Ross is getting his. And by the way, this is a very difficult show for me because I host a show with Russ and I host a show with Ross. So I have to every time I say Ross, I have to consciously say Ross and not Russ because I've done 107 shows with Russ. And so, anyways, if I ever am pausing right before and I'm like, so. Ross. Yeah.
So the better one is when me and Russ are both on a show together with you.
Oh my God, dude.
Because you're done.
Oh, I'm yeah. My brain is fried at that point.
I think at that time you just say a name, and whichever name you say, you then go with a question for that person.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you studying, man? Okay, so you're getting your PhD, UPenn, right?
No, Missouri.
Oh, Missouri. Okay, I thought you were getting it in Pennsylvania. No. Okay, so what are you studying right now?
So we just wrapped the semester. Had econometrics math class, which was just calculus for economics. So just lots and lots of heavy math, and second order derivatives and things of that nature, where figuring out tangent lines or slope intercepts, and lots of things that you can do from these very long formulas, and how you can take matrices and manipulate them with second order derivatives or transposes or inverses, and figure out different things that you can then apply to economics, and how those calculations can be applied back to economics. And so that was interesting. And then I had an econometrics class, which was just basically stats for economics.
Yeah.
Where it's going through and talking about the different theories, Bayesian versus frequentist approaches to statistics, and going through how you would set up a model and what factors, and setting up error codes in the models, because you're never going to be able to calculate for everything, so you have to put these error terms in that then associate back to one another, and why you do it and how you do it. I did much better in that class than I did in the calculus class, just because I did not devote as much time to the calculus class as I probably should have. Next semester, though, I'm taking a very it's an elective course, but it is price theory. So I'm very excited about that. It's going to be more towards, this was the hard science of economics this semester. This was definitely, why we do things the way we do them. And next semester, it's going to be very much more towards theory of, how to think about things and why things happen the way they happen, which is kind of more the approach I've always had to economics. Like I understand that you have to have the hard science. You have to be able to do the hard science. You have to be able to do the math. You have to be able to set up a model, or at least understand how to read a model. But that's not really my interest, is in creating these models. My interest is in making determinations from the models, and then trying to.
Yeah, but it sounds like that's like the shit libby, the shit libbery that comes in.
Yeah,
because Russ and I talked about this on HSP. Like, you have. Okay, so I mean, I'll go way back here, but like in classical Greece, you had your pre-Socratics, and you had your classical philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. They didn't bifurcate. They didn't separate science and the humanities. They were one and the same. So, especially Aristotle in particular viewed ethics as a science in and of itself. And he also, the classical Greeks, they discovered biology, geography, like all of the sciences they discovered, but they also discovered all the humanities as well. They also explored all of those.
Yeah.
And then after Alexander the Great, which would have then been Hellenistic Greece, when Alexander the Great established Alexandria in northern Egypt, suddenly there became this like giant gap. So you had humanities, and that was like philosophy and history and psychology and all of this. And then you had this like other totally unrelated subject, which was the sciences, biology, geography, and so forth. And they were totally separate. And that differentiation carries through to today. Mm-hmm. that you have your humanities and you have your science, and the humanities are kind of like, especially from the right, very much ridiculed as being unserious, and you're complaining about your student loans and you can't make a living off these degrees. You should have done science. And to be honest, like they shouldn't have ever been separated in the first place. I think science can be, I think ethics can be a science. Morality can be a science, and so too is the case with epistemology and metaphysics and so forth. But my question for you is that you seem to be more interested in the humanities, but struggled on the science side. So what are you more interested in? Are you more interested in the humanities, or are you more interested in the quote unquote hard facts science? And I would say a follow-up question would be, do you even agree with the bifurcation between the two?
So I think with economics, like I said, I agree that you have to have both, because if I can't understand how models work, right? So here's where I have to be able to do. here's where I see myself, what I need to be able to do. I need to be able to look at a model and tell whether the model is good, bad, somewhere in the middle. I need to be able to judge the model and then make an assertion of what I think of the model. I then need to be able to look at the how the model was built and then say, well, were they considering this? Were they considering that? And then be able to, because there's models that just aren't comparing certain variables, that certain variables just aren't included in these models. And so you can't then make an assertion towards that variable from
every
a model.
Every model doesn't have every variable.
There's no perfect model, right? That's why there's these error terms at the end of a model, because these error terms just encompass everything we didn't include, right? Everything that we couldn't factor this in. So we just threw a random variable here we think will cover that. And hope that covers everything or explains everything that we didn't get to.
Which is the whole. I'm not saying that data is not useful, but that's the problem with data, is that it's it's by nature imperfect.
Yeah, all datas are all models are wrong. Some are just useful. Is the quote that was at the beginning of my textbook, right? All models are wrong, but some are useful. So not all of them are wrong. Not all of them are useful, but all of them are wrong, right? So there's definite need to be able to sit there and look at them and have an air of questioning to you, which is sad about what's happening today, is that we're basically being told you can't question these scientists, right? These scientists are above reproach.
Yeah. They're equating data with empirical observation.
Exactly. So
there's a quote. One of my favorite quotes. There's Leonard Peikoff, who is the intellectual heir to Ayn Rand. They were having some sort of discussion about epistemology, and he's a philosophy professor, and he was saying, well, I can use data. I can. They were sitting in a hotel room, and he said, I can use data to tell you the likely number of people that are in the lobby right now, like at this moment.
Yeah.
And Ayn Rand said back to him, she said, no, you can take the elevator and you can look for yourself and know exactly how many people are in the lobby.
Yeah.
And the whole point of that story is that data it can be useful, but you always go with firsthand observation of reality, something that you can see for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know, in the case of culinary food, like taste, you rely on going and eating at a restaurant, not Yelp star reviews. You know what I mean? Like, those Yelp reviews, and if it's a 3.5 star restaurant, that's useful information, but you don't know until you eat there, and you don't know until you eat there a bunch of times, right? So, firsthand observation, direct observation of reality always supersedes data. Yeah. So anytime somebody tries to equate data with this is the science, it's like no. Data is an abstraction. It's a rational abstraction. Science is observation until it's proven otherwise. And even then, like, if you assert something, it's just a hypothesis. If you can prove it, it's a theory, and then it's not a theory unless it's proven otherwise. Well, so people conflate all, like, data is science. Data is science. Bullshit. Yeah. Data is not science. Data is just something, but it's not everything.
Yeah, and I mean, it's if I take a trend line and I make a projection, I make a prediction off of that trend line, it's going to be a prediction that follows the trend. But there's so many other things that could occur, right? So we're looking at first order autoregressions, and we're looking at, does this period follow this period, right? And so if, say, I have a first order autoregression of 0.8 to 0.9, that means that, very strongly that if this period was positive, this period will be positive. The next period following it will be positive. But there's always a possibility that there's then, in the next time I take that autoregression and I calculate this period, the first lag period versus the next observed period, that there's going to be that correlation, that autoregression could reverse and become a negative, because it simply could be looking at GDP growth. It does turn negative if I take my regressions over a longer lag. So instead of saying I lag per day, I lag per year, it's more likely to follow simultaneously, right? It's more likely to have a steady regression to it. But if I take it more closely, then one day is likely to be negative, one day is likely to be positive, and then you're getting, it's going to fluctuate much more. But again, modeling is an imperfect science. It's great. It's helpful. It's great for making predictions. But as you said, it's not an observation. It's simply not being able to measure what actually happened. And this is like so many times I get into people who start telling me that the projections of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act was it was going to cost us tax revenue, but it didn't. The observation is that tax revenue went up every year since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed, which is what conservatives were claiming. Hey, if we cut taxes on the corporations, we'll get more jobs, which will get more growth, which will get more, and this is just talking in terms of what the federal government revenue is. That's not talking what the state government revenues are, because they've got increased sales tax revenue, they've got increased property tax revenue, they've got other, so the states are earning more.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is something I wish the right would kind of let go of. The right loves to cling on to, metadata.
Yeah.
And I wish the right would just cling on to reality and not merely what works, but what's right.
Yeah.
Because like we have everything on our side, and the right is like, oh, but the data show that if we have free markets and then the economy will be better off and we'll all be better off. That's what the data shows. And then the left is like, oh yeah, but that's morally wrong. Free markets are morally wrong because it just creates inequality and all of this, this and that, all the arguments. I wish the right would stop. And I guess this was kind of I'm realizing now that perhaps this was an animating motive for me asking you this question, because you're getting your PhD in economics, and I know Foundation for Economic Education, they're a lot of them, especially like the Mises Institute and so forth, they're just so obsessed with economics, and I'm thinking in my head, like, that's great, you're right, you're not wrong, but how about we stop talking about what works and start talking about what's right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I guess that's what I'm really interested in. As you get your PhD in economics, and I commend you for that. I'm not, trying to hate on you for that. I think it's amazing, and I commend you for it, and I think that's awesome. But as you proceed through your PhD in economics, how do you reconcile what works with what's right?
Well, I think you have to think about things in terms of, there's abject morality, right? There's my morality versus your morality. But you have to start, I think what conservatives should be interested in is what is the most good, right? This is an argument I have with people all the time. Like, okay, you're describing a scenario that affects 1% of people, and we shouldn't make policy for the 1%. We can make exemptions for the 1%, but we should not make policy that drives around 1%. We should make policy that drives around supporting everybody else. There's no economic system that is perfect, right? Capitalism is not perfect. It's not, but there is inequality in capitalism. But there's much less inequality in capitalism than in other forms, in other economics models or systems. So we have to start making the equation of what is the best good, what is the most good, not what is perfect. So I told you this the last time we talked. Don't let 100, don't take 0 because you can't get 100. And I think that's where so often now the right has gotten. Is that it's either we're going to get everything we want or we're not going to get anything, right? We're either going to shoot for it all or we're going to shoot for nothing. And there was a story in the Daily Wire the other day where the lady just took the GOP to task over not actually being anti-abortion, right? Like they had 2 years under Trump where they held the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency, and they did not defund Planned Parenthood, right? And so what we have to understand is that we got to quit making arguments over the 1%. We have to stop worrying about those arguments, right? When it comes to abortion, when somebody brings up rape or incest, that's 0.5% of all abortions are performed because of rape or incest. So although you can have sympathy for those people, we don't drive national policy based on those very, very few individuals in that subject.
Sure. Let me ask you this. So, do you believe capitalism is perfect or not?
I don't believe capitalism is perfect.
Okay, let me stop you. Let me stop you. Okay. Why not?
Why not?
Well, okay. Actually, we should establish a definition of capitalism first of all before we even continue. So, in your mind, what is the definition of capitalism, and then I'll establish my definition of capitalism.
So capitalism is a individualistic ownership of resources and goods and means of production in which a profit motive is derived in order to or to necessitate the movement of goods and markets. So, there's different forms of capitalism that fall underneath there, such as laissez-faire or crony capitalism and other things. But, all of them have private ownership of goods and resources and the means of production with a profit motive driving the market interactions.
Okay. So my definition of capitalism is just individual rights, just people being free from each other. That's it. Profit, all of that stuff is important, but subtextual and less important than just simply individual rights. And I believe that individual rights are the connective tissue between politics and morality.
So yeah, I mean, I would argue that profit is what drives psychology, right? So when people are evaluating options, when they're evaluating things for themselves, right, they're individual, they're going to evaluate based on what's the most good for them. So profit is one of those considerations. What's going to make me the most profit? If I have two different options, right, I can develop two different goods, and good A is going to derive me a profit of 15%, and good B is going to drive me a profit of 5%. I'm going to go with good A because it's a better investment. That doesn't mean that good B wouldn't make me money. It's just not as good of investment as good A, which means that the resources are being used most efficiently, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very Socratic way of looking at it. Socrates was all about like knowledge is power. So if you know, then you know what to do.
Yeah.
And I think that divorce is a huge divorce from psychology. So, for example, people will look at a cake. They go, it'll taste good now, but I'm going to be fatter because of it. Tomorrow I'm going to eat a burger. And then the next day I'm going to eat 5 slices of brisket. And then in 6 months from now, I'm going to be fat as shit. I know that, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Because that's what feels good now, So this is like the Epicurean versus the Epicureans. That's debatable. I mean, but
value is subjective, right?
Well, no, I mean, value is value, right? But
I mean, what you value and what I value are two different things.
Yeah, but you can't boil it down to something as simplistic as people always do the thing that's best for them, right? People drink when they know they shouldn't. People smoke weed when they know they shouldn't. People sleep in and they're late to work when they know they shouldn't.
Consideration of what's best for them, right? That's your consideration of what's best for them, not their consideration of what's best for them. So what I'm talking about is the fact that
I think that's objective. I mean, can you just objectively say that being late for work every day until you get fired is subjectively good or bad? I mean, I just think that's objectively bad.
And again, that person is making, they're weighing an opportunity cost. Right?
I don't think they are, but this is a matter of psychology. I don't think they are. I think they're just making bad decisions.
People are irrational, right? People make bad decisions all the time. People speed, people do drugs, things that you or I wouldn't do, right? Like things that you that are rational person.
I mean, I make bad decisions. I'm sure you make bad decisions. Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not like this like supreme being of rationality, and I never make a bad decision. I make bad decisions all the time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that I've told you this 100 times that the most basic right we have is the right to be stupid to others, right? The right to do things that other people think are stupid. That doesn't mean that they're right. By the way, I'm not saying that I think that being late for work or doing drugs is the right thing to do. I'm just saying that you being stupid and me thinking you're stupid is irrelevant to whether or not you should be allowed to do something or not, so long as you don't affect me in that decision.
Right. What I'm saying is that you can say that that's the bad thing to do. That's what I'm saying.
You can say it. I can say it. We can say that Steve Jobs shouldn't have started a business in his garage when he had a high school degree, making a product that nobody in the market was currently after or demanding.
Right, but I'm saying that there's some sort of objective, like we can objectively speak about things. Like I'm saying that Steve Jobs starting a business in his garage was objectively a good thing. And well, yeah. And at the time we could have said, like, okay. So for example, when I started HSP, my dad was like, I remember it was like 50 episodes in and he was like, how many more listeners do you have? And I was like, honestly, not many. We've got like 30 and we haven't increased at all. And he was like, Einstein, and he pulled out the old Einstein quote about, you keep doing the same thing without changing. And that's the definition of insanity. And I was like, I just thought to myself, I was like, you know what? Like, I get it, but fuck that. I'm going to keep doing this. We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep getting better. We're going to improve, So like, I get where he's coming from. He thought that was stupid, that we kept doing it. And that's fine. I accept. Does that make it, but does that make it a bad decision?
No, because you're valuing your personal enjoyment there as well, because you enjoy this. You derive pleasure from it. Therefore, there's a value to it. So it's like, I don't understand people who have to wear nice clothes. I don't get it. I don't to me, it's beyond stupid to have Nike, Under Armour, or Gucci or whatever. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I'm just as covered with my clothes as you are with yours. The utility of the clothing to me is that they provide me warmth and they provide me, a modicum for my shame. Right.
But let me say this really quick though. Like I had a friend. He's now committed suicide. Who? He was like my best friend back in junior high. We hadn't spoken in years. He went down a dark path. I didn't. We split ways in high school. And he's now, I don't know how he committed suicide, but I just know that he did. That's all I know. And he right before he committed suicide, he was producing like rap music, and it was like, I'm sorry, it was shit. It was awful. It was terrible. He had a psychological problem, right? So my point in saying that is that you can weigh someone's psychological state and their activities and their behavior that is so subjective around what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But the value which they are actually producing is not subjective, it's objective, and that's measured through the monetary the monetary well, actually, let me say this. The monetary aspect is one aspect through which you can measure how valuable it actually is. Now, if you don't need to worry about money, I'm not worried about money. I make enough money, and my wife and I, we don't have to worry about that. So for me, this is just a total side gig, and I just have fun, and it's something that I have fun doing, and I don't need to make money off of it. Right. But if we did start making money off of it, that's like a solid metric through which we can say, okay, this is how much that activity is worth.
That's how we can measure the value to others, not the value to ourselves.
Right. So, yeah. Agree.
So I can measure how much my labor is worth by how much somebody's willing to pay me for it. Right. That is the measurement. Like, everybody can think that their labor is worth $1 million an hour. Yeah. But unless somebody's willing to pay you that, it's not. It's definitively not worth that much money. So value to others is derived through price, right? So that's the thing about a free market, a capitalistic market, is that since we're all making decisions, I had a guy the other day put on a 1995 F-350 long bed, 7.3 liter diesel, 380,000 something miles, and he wanted $15,000 for that truck. I was like, you're high. You're smoking crack. Like, there's no way. That truck's worth like $3,000 at most, right? It's like, I don't know what you're thinking. But to him, that's what the truck's worth. Now, over time, either one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to find somebody else who values that truck the same as he does, and he's going to make a fortune off of it because it only takes one idiot, right? Yeah. Or his value of the truck will start to decrease as he sees that other people don't value the truck at the same level. So then the equilibrium will come into play, right? Like we'll get to this point where the person supplying it will meet the price of the person demanding it. And then all of a sudden we'll have a market interaction. Yeah, but that's what happens because of a profit motive. Because of profit motives, the people with supply will, of course, they'll supply infinite amounts at high prices. And they'll supply nothing at low prices. But it's because of how much profit they're making. So supply never starts at zero, right? Supply always starts at where they market what's the minimum amount of profit I can make off of this. And then it moves up from there.
Yeah, I mean, supply technically starts with production. So you have to produce what is supplied has to have been first produced. So it starts with production. But I guess my whole line of in this is that a set of economists.
I think you broke out for a second. I lost you for a second. Luke, you still there? Luke, are you there? Guys, it appears, at least on my side, that Luke is frozen. So I think one of the things he wanted to get to was about how, at least what it seemed like he wanted to talk about was how, thinking about how people react to things is part of economics, as well as how the science of economics is part of economics. So you have the two separate sides, right? You have the theoretical side, which is where, you have people like Mises and you have people like, Friedman and Sol, who thought about how people would react, how people would, change their way of thinking based on a policy change. And then you have people that are econometric, driven, who make these models and try to see what will happen in the market if they make this change. But often they're doing that without making changes to externalities. They're not considering how the market will react. They're considering that the market will stay the same from today till tomorrow, that the same amount of supply, the same amount of demand, the same amount of labor, everything else stays the same. And I'm just going to change this variable, see what happens. That doesn't happen in reality, right? In reality, if I change X variable, so if I change X1, X2 is going to see a change, and X3 is going to see a change, and all of this is going to affect Y.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It all is. And that's, so there's OVB, omitted variable bias, where we're just, there's variables that are not in our models that we just can't know are going to affect. And so we just, without having them in our model, we don't know whether or not what the change to it would actually produce on Y.
Yeah. I'm not sure if the stream dropped for a moment, but I missed a lot of what you said before that.
So you froze on me, and so what I was saying, and what I tried to do is I tried to pick up from where I thought you were headed with that question, was the difference between the psychology of economics and the science of economics.
No, what I'm interested in is not interested in, but I guess I want to encourage you and other future economists and current economists is to consider that markets are philosophically moral, not merely pragmatic. They don't merely work. They're also right. They're the right way to live because people are free.
Yeah.
To think, to act, to live, and that's why they're right.
With the caveat,
because they drive profit motive, not because of anything like that, because it's the proper political system for a human being.
So what I would say there is that because of profit, markets are efficient. And when we're talking about moral today, right, often that conversation revolves around efficiency, right? How are we using resources? Are we using them the best way possible? Because of profit, because of having this, this underlying consumer psychology of how are we going to allocate resources based on what drives the most benefit to me.
But that's not a matter of morality. That's a again,
So
like a theoretical conversation around.
So if you're talking to
economy.
people, so if you're talking to people who are talking about climate change and they're talking about a socialist or a communistic society would be better in that manner, those systems are less efficient at the utilization of resources than capitalism. And so if you're saying, I have 8 apples and I want to feed the most people with this 8 apples, well, capitalism is going to feed the most people with that 8 apples, right?
Yeah, but I think if you're at that point in the conversation, you've already lost.
I don't think you are. I think you have to make these ethical and these you have to be able to make these arguments to a person's morality, to not just to the logos, but to the ethos, right? So we're making these arguments that surround around logos, around the logic of the conversation. But we
I think personally, I don't think you can divorce logos from ethos. I think ethos and logos are not one and the same. I think they're two different topics, but I mean, I think if you divorce logic from ethics, then you've already
you
lost.
need all three, right? You need pathos, you need ethos, you need logos to make a full argument. But there are people who will consider certain arguments over others, right? So we're seeing a driving force in our world today of people who are beyond considering logical arguments and are more to considering emotional pleas, right? What is emotionally sounds good, and so they make decisions on what sounds good.
But to them, it's still an ethical plea, right? They're still pleading from ethics, even if it's emotional. It's still to them ethical.
It's still ethics, but again, they're divorcing the ethics from the logic. Because if you were combining the two, exactly, you would say logically and ethically, capitalism is the best option because it allocates resources the most fairly. It allows for the best opportunity for somebody to gain access to the market, right? So we've seen people who shouldn't have, access to the market, then become access to the market, gain that access because they can. But what we're seeing today, right, at least in the United States, with the further prominence of the central bank, is that we're seeing more crony capitalism. We're seeing more centrally planned capitalism. So there's still private ownership, there's still profit motives, but instead of it being these individual free market interactions where we are the invisible hand, we're not the invisible hand anymore. The government is the invisible hand now. So now we have a defined set of lawmakers who are making these decisions, these market decisions, whereas we would have had this indefinite set of market decisions, which would have been, again, the value conversation of you, me, and everybody else, right? That's the whole thing about a market. It's not about your or my definition of the value. It's about the societal definition of value. Because I don't like, I'm not going to buy $100 pair of Nike shoes, but that doesn't mean other people won't. And that doesn't mean that Nike won't make money off those shoes because my definition of the value is irrelevant to the overall societal definition of value. But like, as you said, individual liberty, I have the right to make my own specific definition of value to me. And because of that, because everybody has those rights, there's no way of being able to fix the system. There's no way of being able to guide it specifically where somebody wants it to go, right?
Yeah.
So, and now what we're seeing is that because we've given the power of these decisions to government and these massive bailouts, these massive stimulus packages, that they're able to push which companies they think should ethically or morally get the most money because, well, it's going to save the most jobs. Well, I'm sorry. GM is a shit company. I'll never buy another GM vehicle as long as I live.
Likewise. Hold on. I want to stop you there. Why?
Why will I not buy GM?
I agree, and I won't either. But I'm curious to know your reasons why.
Okay, so just going back to the history, right? So GM was nearing bankruptcy. They had a lot of American employees. They basically had caved into all these unions in Detroit and Indiana and all these other places where they had their plants, and they were paying way too much. So instead of going through their process and figuring out what they were doing wrong in a business sense, they got the government to give them a ton of money to save these jobs, which they then took and paid their executives a lot of bonus money. And then they took those jobs and got rid of them anyway and sent them down to Mexico where that labor was cheaper. They didn't get a better product. They didn't, change up their lineup or focus on what drove profits for them or their shareholders. They focused simply on what was best for the individuals within the company at the top. And employees be damned, right? And they knew that they could rely on this consumer habit of buying, people like GM vehicles, so they're going to keep buying GM vehicles. Same with John Deere tractors, right? People buy John Deere tractors because their grandpa had a John Deere tractor. People buy a Chevy truck because their grandpa had a Chevy truck. So it's just that I'm going to have that brand loyalty. I swapped. I went from being a Chevy guy to being a Ford guy. I had hated Ford up to that point, but Ford did not take the bailout. Ford went through a modified bankruptcy. They looked at their product line. They modified it. They got rid of products that weren't making them money. They, here in the U.S., they're not going to do small cars anymore, right? They're still going to do them over in Europe because that's what sells over in Europe. But they have too much competition here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So they're not going to do those, and so they're going to focus on what makes them profit. And because of that profit decision, they're now a better company.
The problem with I'm going to ask you a question. So, I mean, the problem with GM is they just created a bunch of bag holders. They got a bunch of money from the government, as you already said, but then they formed a new corporation, and then they just left all their debt behind, and then, now we're a different company. They just fucked over all of their shareholders. Yeah. They just created a bunch of bag holders. That's why I'll never buy a GM product, and that's why nobody should ever buy a GM product ever again. But let me ask you this. Do you find that as a form of capitalism, of the government bailing a company like that out, and then them acting in their own interest, which is, one could argue, I mean, I'm not saying it is, but one could make an argument that that's rational. All the the unions, primarily the unions, but then all the C-suite positions and the higher ups. One could argue they all acted in their own interest, and that's rational.
So
is that
short answer is yes.
A form of capitalism? Because I think that's a valid question.
I do see it as a form of capitalism, and I'm saying in the strictly. So we have gotten a very broad definition of socialism lately, right? We've gotten to where any government spending is considered socialism. Well, government spending is not necessarily socialism. Socialism is government ownership of resources and the means of production. That's what socialism is. And, that's the definition of socialism, the book definition. So I think we have to, and I asked a guy the other day, he goes, the guy goes, do you think Hitler was a socialist? And I said, define socialism. Because if you talk about socialism in its true form and its true definition, then yes, Hitler was a socialist. Hitler looked to nationalize the auto industries. Hitler nationalized mining. Yeah. Hitler nationalized the defense industry. Hitler nationalized almost everything. And he looked to create a strong welfare state. Hitler, one of the reasons he didn't like Jewish people is because he thought Jewish people were all about gaining profit. And he didn't like profit. He was anti-capitalism. He was anti-communism as well. So people have now equated that, if you're socialist, you have to be pro-communism. No, that they're two distinct, separate, in Marxist theory, socialism is a means to get to communism. But it's in the rest of theory, socialism is its own distinct economic system.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a long history in Europe going to 6th century where they absolutely hated capitalism. And the Jews have a long history of being very capitalistic, and to the extent that they were, I commend them for that. They were actually, and I don't think a lot of people realize this or know this, but the Jews were actually barred from participating in guilds or trades in Europe. So this is why,
as were black people in the United States.
Yeah, and this is why they, but specifically with the Jews, this is why they went into being merchants and lenders and bankers and things like this, things which have to deal with the mind, and entertainers. And this is why, now they're in media and Hollywood and so on and so forth. And the alt-right.
I think it's very easy to make a biblical argument that capitalism is favored biblically, right? And if you look at the parable of the talents, if you look at Jesus's teachings, if you look at the story of don't teach a man to don't give a man a fish, teach the man to fish, right? And then the parable of the talents is there was 3 servants, right? The first servant was given 10 talents, the second servant was given 5, the third servant was given 2, each according to his own ability. And the first servant took his 10 and invested it and made 10 more. And the master was pleased and gave him, because you were great with little, you now will be great with a lot. The second servant took 5 and made 5 more, and the master was pleased. The third servant took his 2 and buried it in the yard. And when the master came back, he said, "Here is the 2 I gave to you." And the master said, "No, you will now be cast out. You now will be cast out with the wilderness, the gnash of your teeth." So the Bible, Jesus, a direct parable from Jesus, is talking about how these people taking what was given to them and investing it and making from it and gaining through their own talents was worthwhile.
Yeah, that this is. I mean, I perhaps that's. I think that's no more complicated than an early insight to the power of the mind. Right, your mind is so much more powerful than the body. I'm not. I don't think there's a mind-body dichotomy. This is something that the is-ought gap. This is like a age-old question in philosophy. Is the mind-body gap and is-ought, but and there's all kinds of other philosophical questions which are in the sense of dichotomy, all stemming from the mind-body dichotomy. But I mean, I hear something like that, and I don't think it's any more different than just you make a lot more money with your brain than you can with your body. Your body is finite, unless you're unless you're a UFC fighter,
story in which profit is actively praised, right? That a person who made profit is actively praised for making and for doing so, and is rewarded for doing so. Right. So when we hear that, Jesus would have been a socialist, I don't believe that whatsoever. So as a Catholic, I don't believe Jesus would have been a socialist whatsoever. I believe biblical teaching shows us that, he would have been probably a laissez-faire capitalist. And he probably would have been, very much on the belief that, hard work is rewarded. And
so let me jump in. And really quickly, I was about to say that, unless you're a UFC fighter, MMA fighter, a boxer or something, but even then your brain plays a large part in terms of the marketing side and the business side.
Yeah.
Not to speak to the fighting side, even a football player,
there's skill. Yeah. There's mental skill involved in that.
Yeah. But so then let's switch gears. Let me ask you this. So you were saying, okay, so you're Catholic. I grew up basically non-religious. I was baptized in a Methodist church. I was educated into Catholicism at a late age. I was in, I think, 8th grade. When I was it's like we didn't, I don't know, we like my parents kind of like, they just didn't take us to church for a period of about 10 years. And I think we have about 10 minutes left, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll wrap this up after this. This will actually be a good teaser for the next show. My parents didn't take us to church for about 10 years. It was very awkward for me, actually. Because I didn't know anything about the Bible or religion or anything for, those like early formative years of your childhood. And, they would come up in school and people would talk. I remember like in like 6th grade, there was like some Bible reading something in our history class. And I was like, I felt so inadequate that I knew so little about it. And then my dad, when I was about 14 or 15, said he was converting to Catholicism, which is my mother's religion. Because he felt as though that were the only denomination of Christianity and religion in general in which he could intelligently defend. That was his words. So I was like, all right, yeah, my dad's smart. I'll go along with that. So, in 8th grade, I got went and got my first communion. Then I got confirmed, and we went to church. Like every Sunday for years. I later I stopped going to church, and now I don't regard myself to be religious in any capacity. And maybe this is a teaser. Maybe you can speak for a couple minutes on this before we sign out. But how do you reconcile the current Pope's statements about climate change, the Great Reset, Corona, all of this, as a practicing Catholic?
Okay.
What do you how do you reconcile? Because my dad's statements on it are like, it's just the Pope. That's not Catholicism.
Yeah.
That's
So
my dad's response. I'm curious to know where your head's at.
I'm not gonna be far from that, right? Because the Pope is human, right? And humans are infallible or are fallible, right? Only Jesus was infallible. Only God is infallible, right? Like everybody else makes mistakes. Everybody else has errors in logic. Everybody else has ways of thinking. So the Pope is making this, making observations based on his upbringing, which was, of course, Argentinian, which Argentinian has a long history of being a socialistic country. And so he's making arguments, and so there are arguments in the church for, more of a empathetic form of capitalism, but there's not, I don't see an argument for socialism. Now, today he came out and said, hey, it's okay to use vaccines that were developed using aborted fetal cells. And it's like, okay, no, the church has long taught that that's not acceptable. And so he's now making comments so okay, so let's take one argument he made. He made an argument, people blew up over this. The Pope said it's okay to be gay. Well, the Pope didn't say it wasn't a sin. The Pope said it's a Catholic's job to love everybody, even people who sin. He wasn't saying, so even I'll defend him in this one. He wasn't saying that the Catholic Church is going to accept homosexuality or is going to allow it. What he was saying was that we're not going to beat and castigate those who are homosexual. And, we want you to still come to Mass. You're not going to receive communion, but you can still come to Mass and hopefully repent your sins, be a repentant sinner, and then be able to get back into the grace of God. So, but some of the things he's saying politically now, you have to remember, Christ saying, give unto God what is God, give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. And I think he's trying to make a more distinct separation of the church away from politics. And he's trying to, but in doing so, he's making the church more political, right? I think it's a backfiring on him because, of course, in today's age, everything is taken in a political stance. So when he makes an argument that he thinks he's making from a church standpoint, people are going to take it politically. People are going to look at it in a political sense. And there's arguments that he's making that just, as a Catholic, so I was not born and raised Catholic. So I almost had the exact opposite of your upbringing. I was born and raised Lutheran. And I went to a Lutheran school until 8th grade where every morning we had religious classes. And, that first hour of every school day was a religion course. And I was studying to be a Lutheran pastor. And then in studying to be a Lutheran pastor, I kind of came to the realization that the reformations that Martin Luther, the 95 thesis that he nailed to the cathedral wall there in Germany, or the cathedral door, the Catholic Church had gone through most of those reformations, had come back and said, okay, actually now we kind of see Luther's point. Not at the time, of course. At the time Luther was cast out for a while. He did die a Catholic. Martin Luther never intended to create the Lutheran Church. That was never his intention. It was never his concern. It was never his want. His want was for the Catholic Church to get better, which I think by and large, over a period of time, he was able to accomplish. Of course, not within his lifetime. But when you look at biblical scripture and you start studying it, you start coming back to Catholicism is the true church. I kind of with your dad that Catholicism is the true church. It is the church from Christ.
I do have to say there was I went to when I was in college, I was having a lot of questions around the existence of God and all this sort of thing, and I kind of on my own come to this conclusion that the purpose of our creation of the concept of a God was the result of our own inability to conceive of the fact that one's own consciousness will cease to exist. That was like something I'd come upon on my own in college, and I was like, I think that is where religion comes from. It's like it's just you try to think about not thinking, and you can't think about it. So you have to have somewhere to go, And that's where I was like, okay, that's where I think it. So I went in, I went to my priest and I talked to him about it. And he was kind of just some summary about it. He just summarily was like, go read this book called Handbook of Christian Apologetics, which I did. And it's all the metaphysical arguments for the existence of God. I didn't really understand it at the time, but now I do. But yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. But where I came to take issue ultimately with Christianity, specifically Christianity, most definitely Catholicism, but more broadly Christianity, is the morality, not the metaphysics. And I find like all the Christopher Hitchens and the oh shit, who are the four horsemen? Christopher Hitchens, Sam, Richard Dawkins. Oh shit, I have to look them up. Sam Harris.
You're talking the four horsemen of atheism.
Yeah. They're all about metaphysics. None of it's morality. And the irony of it all is they all morally agree with Christianity. Like totally. Yeah. They're all like morally, they are all total Christians. Metaphysically, they're atheists. And like I approach it from the opposite stance. Like I don't understand at this point Catholic morality. And well, it's not that I don't understand it. I just objectively disagree with it. And that's okay. Like we can talk about that. It's not like Christians are bad people or something like this. It's just, I just, for me personally, I have a good experience with it, and it really, I had to really detach myself from it over the course of a number of years.
Well, and a thing you always have to remember is you can't judge the church by the people in the church, right? Because
but for me, it was not that. Like I remember even my grandpa's funeral. At my grandpa's funeral, it was not his funeral, it was his rosary. When we left his rosary, I was angry, angry, because it's like grandpa, who is one of the greatest, possibly the greatest man whom I've ever known. Stoic, hardworking, died wealthy, in spite of not having a college degree, worked in the oil fields for his whole life, battled in World War II. And here I am at his rosary talking about, or not talking, but here that he's damned, he's the sinner, and he's gonna, be lucky if he doesn't burn in flames. And now it's all about Jesus Christ. It's not about him. And I was personally offended by that. I was like, who the fuck are you to talk about my grandpa? He's the one that for whom we are here today. And who the fuck are you to talk about like him in that light and then make it all about you? Make it all about the church. We're here for him, not the church. You like that, literally, like that's how I felt.
Yeah. And, so I mean, I can't speak to that interaction, right? But I can tell you that, when I talk to a lot of people who've had interactions like this with Catholicism, I can tell you that that's not the church. That is that person within the church.
No. That was not a person. That was a recording. That was an officiated rosary. That was not like a person who got up on the mount and preached a sermon. That was literally the rosary. And I remember driving home. My dad was perfectly fine with it. And he was like, "Why are you so mad?" And I was like, "I cannot fucking believe that just happened." And he was like, my dad was just totally caught off guard. And I was like, what's wrong? And I was like, we were supposed to be there for my grandpa, and all we heard about was Jesus Christ and all his sacrifices and all this shit. And I feel like I just wasted my fucking hour, and like I wanted to be there for my grandpa. I didn't want to be there for the church, And my dad was just, I could tell, like I could see his mind working, where he was like, wow, I had never even thought about it like that, and like I was like full blown Catholic for like from the age of like 12 to about I would say 24, 25. So, I'm not like, again, I'm not like one of these four horsemen of atheists, like, crazy atheists,
Yeah.
like, fuck religion. I'm not like that at all. But like, I kind of thought my way, out of it and differently. And then once I arrived at a certain point, then I started like going back to Texas and like interacting with religion in a totally different light. And then I was just horrified, frankly, horrified by like how fucked up a lot of it is. And like attending my grandpa's funeral was like the pinnacle of it, where I was like, this is wrong at every level. And I cannot even consider, like, I'm not, I know it's not enough to say that I'm not Catholic. I'm offended by it at this point, you know?
So, I mean, again, I can't speak to your experience, right? Because I wasn't there and I didn't participate in it. And so I can't be, I can't be certain to what happened, or, I can tell you that, I can apologize that you were offended, but I know that, okay, so, I was a later in life Catholic, right? So my wife was born and raised Catholic. So, when we decided to get married, it was kind of the thing that pushed me over the top of, okay, I'm going to convert to Catholicism, is that I wanted our family to have one religion. I didn't want us to have two different religions or two different teachings, right? I wanted to have a unified theory that my kids would grow up with. And, I had that as a kid with Lutheranism, but, I grew up in Lutheran. My parents were both Lutheran. So we grew up Lutheran. It was fully Lutheran. There wasn't, oh, well, this, or this belief, that belief. But I know in talking with some other people that have had, differing interactions with the church, that the things that they were taught and the things that I was taught, not were, because I'm not plural. I mean, I'm fat, but I'm not plural yet. So
if Corona lockdowns go on any longer, I will be plural.
You'll be plural. You'll be Luke's.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is, I think, room for priests even within the church to make interpretation, and based off that interpretation, they have, changed certain aspects or certain tonalities of the teaching. So for me, I was taught that a person who is agnostic or atheist and who was never Catholic will still have an opportunity to go to heaven as long as they lived a morally good life and they didn't break any of the, the basic commandments. And, that the only real sin is that to have been Catholic and then to renounce your Catholicism, or to renounce God, to have known God and then to renounce him. And as long as you had never known God, as long as you had never accepted God, and that you still lived a morally good life, you still tried to be a morally good person, and live within the basic teachings of the church, that you could still attain, heaven, that you could still obtain the glory of God.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
That's one thing.
They have to have that out.
What?
They have to have that,
Well,
otherwise, where's the logic in the history of humanity? Like, why did God come around 100 years ago? I mean, but now here we are, like, getting into the metaphysical arguments again, which I find not to be compelling,
Yeah. So for me, the metaphysical arguments, talking about God on earth, right? Evidence of God on earth. And so this is where we have to go back to historical accounts. And that's all we have, right? And historical accounts can be disputed, right? Because I take the Bible to be the work of God, but other people are going to take the Bible to be the work of man. And men lie, right? And men exaggerate, and men fabricate. So, an Aggie will never lie, cheat, or steal, but they'll elaborate, collaborate, and fabricate.
You act like you've never caught a fish before and taken a picture of it.
I mean,
and told your friends about how big your fish was.
That's not a story that's going to resonate with me a lot, since I don't eat fish. I don't fish that often. Again,
no. I'm saying men don't exaggerate about their fish. Yeah.
Fish was here, then the fish was there, then the fish was here. Right? Of course, men lie, and of course, men exaggerate, and of course, and I mean men in the time of humanity. By nature, we're always trying to one up each other. That's one of the things that we're always going to try to do, and we're always going to compare each other to each other. But I think you look at you look at, going back to the metaphysicals, you look at the historical accounts of Christ's miracles, and that gives you I had a lady the other day try to tell me that it's physics can explain why the Red Sea parted with Moses. And it's like, no, it can't. The whole thing about miracles is she was saying miracles are metaphors. They didn't actually happen. They're metaphors. I was like, no, miracles were actual events that defied scientific logic, that proved the divinity of Christ, that were proof positive to the people who were there, who witnessed it, that Jesus was divine, that he was not simply some spiritual teacher, that he was God himself. And that's why he was able to walk on water. That's why he was able to break the fish into 5,000. And, for the people who say, well, Christ did that because he was feeding the hungry. No, Christ did that to prove his divinity, right? There were other hungry people there in those times. And Christ said, good.
Most people back then were hungry. But let me ask you this. Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this because I want to talk about it on the next show. I'm trying to be honest when I ask this question. I'm not trying to be patronizing or insulting or anything. And do you believe that Jesus parted the Red Sea, or Moses parted the Red Sea?
I do.
Okay. Maybe we should table that for the next show.
Yeah. So I will be honest that I take the Bible as a historical account.
Okay.
Now, I know, there are parts of the Bibles, there are parables that are metaphorical, that we have these stories but they are clearly meant to be metaphorical. They are prefaced to be metaphorical. And because they are prefaced to be metaphorical, and these other portions are not, that they're prefaced to be historical accounts, that we can separate the Bible into these distinct options. That you have the parables, you have the story of the parable of the talents, or the parable of the wayward son, or the good these other events, and then you have historical accounts, the birth of Christ, the life of Isaiah and the life of Job, that are historical accounts of what happened to these people. And again, your rationality on whether or not this is a historical account or not is your own to make, right? And that's something that you have to make. And it is faith that you are taking this, that it is my faith that tells me this is a historical account. It is not based on any amount of I was there, I saw it personally, or a descendant of mine saw it, or anything like that. Now, what we can say is that there are multiple cultures who make mentions of several of these events, and that corroborate at least some of it. And because of that, we can then say, okay, there's enough from these other cultures who did not know about the Bible, who did not know about the apostles, or about Isaiah, or about Noah, that wrote historical accounts of these events, that would then be able to, that was passed down in their folklore, that it then speaks to the authenticity of the Bible. Yeah.
Well, let's pick it up there for the next show. What say you?
I say that's good. So, guys, if this is our first episode doing this, this is very much so Luke and I feeling our way through this. It's going to be more philosophical conversations that revolve around our personal knowledges and revolve around our personal beliefs. So we talked a little bit about sports today, but I don't think this is going to be a sports show by any means.
No, that was honestly, that was an isolated topic. I posted that in the Discord and nobody messaged, and I was like, okay, I have to know. So that was an isolated topic, and I totally agree with you that I enjoy these philosophical conversations. Maybe sometimes they're difficult, maybe sometimes they're fun, maybe sometimes they're I don't know. I think Ross, I think you and I are both like pretty level-headed enough. It's never going to become argumentative. I'm
happy to have a civil debate, right? And I'm happy to accept that another person's rationality is not going to equal mine, right? That you're going to make decisions based on your rationality, and it's going to be different from mine because we have different life experiences. We have our brains are wired, our chemistry in our brains are different. And I've said this about Catholicism. I put 1,000 different Catholics in the room. I might have 1,000 different definitions of Catholicism, right? So no two people think alike. And the nice thing is that you and I do have differences, and it has very much so appeared in the past. We agree on a lot. We do have a lot of things that we agree on, that we both think a capitalistic society is the best society. We both think that, laissez-faire economics is moral. And we think that, individual liberties are, of course, 100%, virtuous and important. Then, when people tell you that there is no individual liberty, there's only societal liberty. Without individual liberty, there is no societal liberty. Unless the individual in the society is free, the society itself is not free.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, so Ross, where are we at? 2 weeks from now?
I think every other Sunday for me is, and the listener can dictate to us a little bit. We'll take some free market advice here. If the listener's willing to listen every other Sunday, then great. If they start clamoring for more, then we'll look into it. But for right now, with schedules permitting, every other Sunday seems to work, and that gives you time to go talk to Russ and me time to talk to Kyle, and both of us time to work.
Absolutely. So then the next show will be on, today's Monday, the 21st. So then the next one would be Sunday, the 3rd. So look out for the Of Life and Liberty with Luke and Ross on Sunday, January 3rd. In the meantime, we are going to do a Christmas live stream on Wednesday, December 23rd. That's in 2 days.
Yep.
Ross, do you have anybody lined up yet? I mean, you and Kyle are the magicians with guests. So
I don't currently have anybody who is on the hook. Most of the people I have mentioned it to are, of course, have Christmas plans around that time that they don't want to, guarantee they can devote time to getting on a live stream. But we'll keep poking at the nest and see who we can who comes available, because there's definitely guys, this last year with HSP and with Zero Gravity Media and SBU and all the stuff we've been doing, it's kind of been a hell of a year. We've grown a lot, and not only just our subscriber bases, but also in the quality of our content. From when Kyle and I first started to where we are now is just night and day difference. And it's a lot of trial and error. Me and Luke spending a lot of time on the phone with each other, like, shit, this program doesn't work, or that program doesn't work, or
oh my God,
we tried to spin up an Amazon server at one point in time, and
I probably shut that damn thing down. By the way,
I kept
getting emails about it, and I was like, "Fuck, am I getting charged right now?" Like,
it wasn't a failure. It wasn't it wasn't as good as having a computer at home, but it wasn't a failure either. It worked for when we were using it. It was just extremely complicated to use.
Yeah.
Me and you really late at night for you and early in the morning for me, trying to get on that son of a gun.
Jesus, dude, that thing was, that was a bitch. I mean, I even know how to use AWS.
And I was very much learning on the fly, which is why I was just sitting on the phone with you, like, all right, well, we're gonna do this.
Yeah. All right, guys. All right, so we're good to go. Ross, where can they find SBU? Drop your Twitter handle, all your socials.
So SBU, we stream on Facebook, we stream on YouTube, on the Zero Gravity Media YouTube channel, and we also have a Twitch channel now. So it's at Shoe Bros Unfiltered on Twitch. If you want to go over there, we're looking for alternative means to stream in case YouTube gets a big axe.
But y'all have a website as well with merch, right?
Yeah, we have a sticker. Merch is a strong word. We do have a sticker you can buy with a QR code that no longer works. Thank you, Kyle. And Kyle got a free QR code, not realizing that it was only good for a month. So there's that. So you can follow me on Twitter. It's the Twitter handle's right there. It's at Ross Schumann. It's just my name. Luckily I do have the big blue check mark there beside the name. So you can be on the lookout for that. Twitter follower count is growing quickly. I'm over 1850 now.
Yeah, I mean, so all you need to do if you want to get a blue check mark, all you need to do is run for Congress, and you're sorted.
That's right. It's simple as that. You just file the paperwork. So here's Twitter getting new follower announcements right now. So just it's just going up as we speak. It's just what I do, man. So we're at 1840 right now. We're growing. So a week ago we were at 1600. Now we're at 1840. So
All right.
it's fun. And then I'm always available for conversations there. I spend a lot of time where I'm sitting in a truck, not doing anything, just watching other people do shit that I can, have conversations with you via Twitter. But I did have an announcement, and I forgot to make it on SBU, and I damn near forgot to make it here.
Okay. What's up?
So I have now been elected to the Texas Republican Party Policy Review Board as a voting member.
Oh, damn. Okay. So what does that mean concretely?
So that means that we meet weekly to discuss state policy that we want to submit to the state congressmen and the state senators to pass in the state legislature. So it's a chance for us to work on legislation that will actually get presented to congressmen. And then, will be recommended by the board, and those board recommendations will then go to the state legislators for them to decide whether or not to present bills on or not.
So you're going to are we seceding now or what?
So secession would still require a federal invitation to secede. It is Texas State Constitution of 1869 specifically states we cannot secede. So sorry, Russ. Sorry, Dan. It's illegal for the state of Texas to do so. We would have to pass a constitutional amendment in order to put the right to secession back in. But in today's
but I mean, we know that the Supreme Court doesn't give a shit about that. So, they don't care about if you violate your state constitution. So, I mean, that's a non-issue, I think, at this point.
For that, and then economically, secession doesn't make the most sense.
But morally, does it?
It's the argument I make is, if you lose a game, do you try to get better and come back and win the next time, or do you pick up your ball and go home and just never play again?
All right, let me turn it back on you. What if the refs are compromised?
Then you figure out a way to get better refs.
Yeah.
That's the fight we have ahead of us. It's a fight. It's a fight.
That's the point. A fight,
but
I mean, if the refs are compromised, there's no game anymore.
No, the refs are not the refs of the refs, right? So there is a way.
The people are the refs of the refs.
Exactly. So there is a way to change the system and fundamentally make it better, but that's not going to happen if you just stop participating, in the system.
I'm not suggesting that we should secede, but things have become existential. I'll put it that way.
Well, and
we need to start asking ourselves, like, what is the path forward? I'm not one of these people where I'm neither like the Q people where it's like, oh, trust the plan. And I'm also not the other people where it's like, oh, melt it down and we need to secede. I'm not either. But we need to start asking ourselves, when the refs are compromised, what are our options here moving forward? And perhaps that's something else that we can discuss on the next show as well.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting opportunity. It's something where I was elected to be the representative for West Texas. So it's, congratulations, man. You and I have talked about some of the bills that I've written for Texas state legislators in the past. One of them is a school choice bill. One of them is a extension of the ag exemption. So the property tax ag exemption to solar and wind energy. So, these are things that I think could help rural Texans and could help all Texans. So I think it's something where it's worth discussing. But, now it gives me a platform to actually be able to have these conversations directly with the people who could enact them.
For sure, man.
So,
all right. Well, dear listener, you know where to find Ross. You can find him at Ross Schumann. That's ROSSSCHUMANN. You can find me on Twitter at Lucifer Skinner. That's LUKEFAHRSKINNER. You can find Shoe Bros Unfiltered on our website, zero-gravity-media.com. You can also find it on their website. What is it, Ross? Help me out.
him-haw.com.
him-haw.com. And also you can find us on Facebook, Zero Gravity Med. Find us on Twitter, Zero Gravity Med. All right, Ross. Thank you so much, brother. Till next time. Actually, till Wednesday. You're going to be on the Christmas show, yeah?
I should. Yeah, there shouldn't be any issues with me being on the Christmas show. No.
All right, cool. So that's 2 p.m. Central Time Zone, America time, on Wednesday, the 23rd. And until then, all right, peace.
Peace and God bless.